David Katz is Chief Executive Officer of Global Security Group, a firm providing a variety of security, investigative and life safety services, as well as specialised tactical training. Thank you for your time. Now, firstly, from your website, it seems like you're perhaps one of these companies that provide some of these school shooter training and support programs. Now, many of these schools, particularly these police, that are supposed to be security at these schools, have signed up for these courses. How do you prepare and factor in that ultimately it's up to the individual to confront a life-threatening situation that has the potential of what happened in Uvalde?
You're exactly right. And although most schools nominally go through active shooter training and most police departments go through active shooter training, much of that training is not exactly appropriate given the nature of these attacks. You're quite correct when you make the point that it's up to the individual officer to make that decision to confront immediately anyone intentionally or attempting to harm children. So there's a variety of things that go into that. You have to select the right personnel. They've got to be fit. They've got to have the proper level of tactical ability, skill, and of course, courage and aggression, and balance that with the fact that most days you're just going to be greeting children and being a reassuring presence. So it's a very, very difficult thing, but training has to be meaningful, it has to be real, and it has to be repetitive.
Just a couple of weeks after Sandy Hook happened, the FBI spent $30 million on these kinds of training programs across the country. Is this a little bit of just a check-box exercise here, especially given the fact that there are so many schools, so many various types of security personnel manning them, and given that only just 2 months prior, before Uvalde had this massacre, there was a drill taking place on that very premises?
Yeah. I don't want to say it was just simply a check-the-box exercise. I'm sure it had some value. But I think every institution, every school, and by the way, it's not just schools, it's companies, and and anyone who employs has a large employee base. Everyone's got to prepare in a meaningful sense. So just simply holding a training session and saying, okay, we're good, we're prepared. No, that's not what you need to do. What you need to do first and foremost is look at the exterior, harden the school, meaning make it difficult. It's impossible to make it virtually impregnable, but you need to make it very, very difficult for a determined adversary to gain access. That's number one. And number two, you have to completely change the tactical approach that many police departments seem to be hanging on to. Post-Columbine, the mindset went from the officers on the scene, secure perimeter, and wait for the tactical teams to arrive, to the first officer there goes in immediately. If you look at the NYPD as an example, their patrol guide says emphatically, the officer shall make contact. There's no waiting for command, there's no waiting for backup, you go in. And if you go down, the next officer does the same thing.
So what went so wrong then in Uvalde, given that the police were outside this barricaded classroom for an hour? One child made 6 calls to 911 to plead for help inside that classroom. What went wrong?
It is inexplicable. So we're getting bits of information, but again, I don't know what's accurate. I don't know what's hyperbole. If first of all, the protocol is that whoever that officer is who arrives, that officer doesn't wait for permission. They don't wait for direction. They go. So the first officers on scene should have been in that school. Period.
So Sorry, do go on.
My understanding is the commanding officer, who was apparently recently appointed chief of police in Uvalde, apparently made the assessment that the active shooter protocol was not applicable given the circumstance, and deemed it what's called a barricade suspect. A barricade suspect in other circumstances would call for the typical secure the perimeter, call in a negotiator, and work through that way. That is never appropriate in this particular circumstance. So the command, whatever that was given, was completely incorrect and antithetical to every single thing we've learned on how to respond to active shooter incidents.
Incredibly disturbing. Thank you, David Katz there, Chief Executive Officer of Global Security Group.